What's up everybody, happy Friday, welcome back to the channel for another episode of the Ask Me Anything series. I figured today would be the perfect time to do another episode of this because there's just so much to talk about right now with all the player movement that's taken place over the past week or so. As always, huge thank you to every single one of you who took the time to come up with a question and leave it on the post. Even the ones that don't get featured in the video, just know I read every single one and I appreciate all of you guys. So the first question for this episode comes from Mikey Schwartz, who says, do you think both the Sens and Wings could compete for a playoff spot next season? The East is going to be tough. Maybe the Bruins, Pens, or Caps don't make it, and the Wings and Sens could fill those spots. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. I love your content. Keep up the great work. I really appreciate the kind words, and this was one of the most liked comments on the post, so I had to feature it. However, I don't want to dive too deep into this because I actually do plan on my next couple of videos on the channel being about the Red Wings and about the Senators and answering this question kind of and previewing them heading into next season. So without diving too deep into it and going over all the moves each of these teams have made over the offseason so far, I will say I do fully expect both of these teams to, at the very least, be competing for playoff spots. I don't think these teams are going to be, in the bottom 5 of the league. Actually, now that I think of it, Ottawa or Detroit, they weren't even in the bottom 5 of the league this past season, so maybe to make it more clear, I fully expect both of these teams to jump up in terms of season point total by at least like 10 to 15 at the minimum. The next question we have comes from Adam, who says, do you think trading for Burns and Pacioretty can push Carolina over the hump and help them make a deep run in the playoffs, or are they still missing a few pieces to be a true cup contender? Love the vids, keep up the good work, thank you for the kind words. I really like what Carolina has done this offseason. I think they look more like true contenders now than they did last season when you just look at their roster on paper, and I know they lost Trocheck, they're most likely losing Niederreiter, he's still a UFA, they lost Tony DeAngelo, but adding a guy like Max Pacioretty, that is a significant upgrade over somebody like Nino Niederreiter. Pacioretty is one of the most elite snipers in the game still, he's a guy who can still score at about a point per game pace, and this may be a little bit of a hot take, maybe not, but I think we're going to see Brent Burns have one of the best seasons he's had in a long time because there's not going to be so much pressure on him. He's not going to have to be amongst the league leaders in minutes like he has been season after season for the Sharks. And also, I think Ondrej Kase on a one-year, $1.5 million deal was one of the better value signings of the offseason so far. I think Kase is a fantastic two-way middle six forward. He can kill penalties here and there as well. The Hurricanes are in a really good spot. I think the only worry would maybe be that they don't have a true number 2 center now. Is Jordan Staal that at this point in his career? Probably not. He's more so ideally a third-line center at this point. There is also the possibility of Jesperi Kotkaniemi taking another leap and filling in that number 2 center role, but no matter what happens, Carolina is deep enough on the wing, their defense is so good, and if they get the goaltending that they got this past season from Freddie Anderson again, they'll be able to mask the loss of Trocheck easily. The next question we have comes from Hockey Fan, who says, are you concerned for the Islanders because they have only made one move to this point, trading for Alex Romanov? Do you think they need to make more changes to their team to make them legit playoff contenders next season? Also love the videos, thank you for that. I would say I'm a little bit concerned. It definitely stings that they missed out on Johnny Gaudreau, and as far as the Romanov trade goes, I wasn't even a big fan of that trade for the Islanders. I think they gave up, the 13th overall pick? I feel like that's quite a steep price to pay for Romanov, but I mean, we've seen the Islanders with basically the same roster they have right now, minus a couple pieces here and there, make it to back-to-back conference finals. I'm very confident in the fact that they will be better this upcoming season than they were last season, and I mean, they won't start the year on like a 20-game road trip, so that'll definitely be a big help. Honestly, what I'm most concerned about is how this team is going to look under a new coach that isn't Barry Trotz. Obviously, Barry Trotz got so much credit for the success of the Islanders after John Tavares left, and rightfully so. He had this team playing a system that absolutely worked, especially when you got to the playoffs. It may not always been the most exciting hockey to watch, but it worked. It won them playoff series. Maybe it'll be better. I'm confident that we'll see a more unlocked Matthew Barzal in terms of his offensive game, so that should make them a lot more fun to watch, but will that lead to success? Who knows? It's going to be really interesting to see what kind of year the Islanders have. Moving on now, the next question we have comes from GF Films, who says, it's been a quiet offseason for Montreal so far. Other than the draft and the Dach trade, can you see them making any big trades, Petrie, Anderson, Dvorak, etc., or signings? This is actually a really interesting question. As far as signings go, I don't really see them being too active. I mean, amongst the top name free agents that are left, John Klingberg, Nazem Kadri, guys like that, I don't think they're going to be players for them. Maybe I could see them going after a guy like Sonny Milano, who's still a UFA. He wasn't qualified by the Ducks, and he just had a really good season in Anaheim. If he can be had for like under a $2.5 million AAV, I think that'd be worth a shot for Montreal for sure. As far as trades go, I feel like Jeff Petrie's the most likely of the names you mentioned, but Kent Hughes actually just spoke on this not long ago, and he said he's not just going to trade Jeff Petrie for the sake of trading him and get basically peanuts in return. He's only going to make that deal if he feels like it makes them better or sets them up better for the future. I think the Habs are in a really good spot right now. I don't think this is a rebuild that's going to take, 6-7 years. I could could see them being back in playoff contention like 2-3 years from now, and it obviously helps getting a guy like Juraj Slafkovsky first overall, having a guy like Cole Caulfield, who I think can be a perennial 35-plus goal scorer. Kent Hughes has been very smart since taking over as GM of the Canadiens, and I think he's going to continue to do that by just not doing too much. Continuing on now, the next question we have comes from Trevor, who says, will the Flames still be a playoff team after the loss of Johnny? Love the content, keep it up, thank you for the support. I'm gonna say yes. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I don't think the Pacific is all that great of a division. I think Daryl Sutter is still a great coach, and he's going to get the best out of the group that he has heading into next season. Obviously, the loss of an MVP caliber player is going to sting. We're going to see, the goal and point totals of Elias Lindholm and Matthew Tkachuk probably come down a little bit from what they were this past season, but the fact is, you still have a fantastic goaltender in Markstrom. Again, you have a great coach in Daryl Sutter. You still have 2-star players up front in Elias Lindholm and Matthew Tkachuk. Still have a strong blue line. I'm pretty confident in the fact that Calgary's still going to be very competitive, be in the playoff hunt in the Western Conference, and there's rumors going around right now that they are pursuing Nazem Kadri, who's still a UFA, so obviously if they're able to sign him, that would make me even more confident in saying this. Next up, this question comes from Christian, who says, it's looking like the Red Wings are going to need to trade out a forward. If they do, who do you think it will be, and what will the return be? Also, big fan of the vids. Thank you for the support. I said this the other day on Twitter after all the signings the Red Wings made. It does look like they're probably going to have to move out a forward, most likely a winger, because it's crowded up there in terms of forwards, and internal competition is definitely a good thing. There's nothing wrong with having too many good players, but say if a guy like Jonathan Berggren has such an impressive camp that he just can't be left off the Red Wings, which is something I could see happening. He was one of the better players in the entire AHL this past season. If that happens, then that could bump a guy like Filip Zadina down to the 4th line, or he'd have to play Berggren on the 4th line, and I don't think either of those guys' games are suited to be on the 4th line. I just don't think that would make any sense. Also, when Robbie Fabry comes back from the LTIR, that's going to make things even more difficult. So honestly, I will say Zadina is a guy that I think will be shopped around a little bit, but I would put my money on it being Tyler Bertuzzi. Actually, he's heading into the final year of his contract. He's one of the more valuable players on the Red Wings, I would say, in terms of trade value, like not including, Seider, Raymond, and Edvinsson and those guys. He's had a couple of tough negotiations with the Red Wings already. I honestly feel like this is a guy, if he hits the open market, he's going to leave. So I kind of feel like Steve Yzerman should explore the idea of trading Bertuzzi, especially after signing, the likes of David Perron, getting a guy like Dominic Kubalik, the potential of Berggren coming up from the AHL. There's a lot of options there on the wing, and if you can trade a guy like Tyler Bertuzzi for a big haul, I still think Detroit's in a much better position and is a much better team now than they were a year ago. So those are definitely my two, prime trade candidates for the Red Wings. I'll say Zadina, I'll throw him in there, but I think most likely it'll be Tyler Bertuzzi. Next up, we have a question from Ryan Plunkett Hockey, who says, just saw the Palat signing from New Jersey. I think this signing and the Vanacek signing can get them closer to over the hump and into the playoffs. How do you feel about the Devils, and do you think they can snatch a wildcard spot next season? So actually, in the last Ask Me Anything episode, there was a question, which teams from each conference do you think that didn't make the playoffs this past season can make it this upcoming year? And for the East, I actually mentioned the Devils. I gave them as my pick. I really like the Palat signing. Sure, $6 million over, I think, 5 years, maybe a little bit of an overpayment, but getting a guy like Andre Palat, who is such a good complementary two-way winger, he can do so many things. I think he's going to complement Hughes, Hischier, and all the young forwards that the Devils have incredibly well. Even after the Vanacek signing, though, I am still worried about the goaltending situation. Like, is Blackwood and Vanacek a tandem that can get you into the postseason? I'm not 100% sold on that, but I've said this so many times on the channel. Goaltending is so random in the NHL. You never know what could happen. I really think this team is like one good two-way top four defenseman and one legit above average starting goaltender away from being a real problem. Moving on now, this question comes from Max, who says, with the Gaudreau signing, I feel like the Blue Jackets' future is really underrated with the young core they have: Sillinger, Johnson, Laine, Werenski, Boqvist, Juracek, and more. Do you think they can be a true contender in a few years? I don't want to go as far as saying like a true Stanley Cup contender just yet in a few years, but I think this is a team that will be competing for the playoffs this upcoming season. I think that's what they want to do, and depending on how the development goes of a guy like Cole Sillinger, and most importantly, a guy like Kent Johnson, who I feel like has the potential to be a point-a-game player in the NHL. If Johnson can become that, you mix that in with a guy like Johnny Gaudreau, Cole Sillinger, Patrick Laine being like a 30-plus goal scorer year in, year out, which I think he can get back to being at that level. Then you have Werenski, who's a horse on the blue line, Merzlikins, who's a good starter. You have the makings of having an amazing team. And now for the final question of the episode, another one revolving around the Blue Jackets here. This one comes from Bushido, who says, who do you think Columbus moves in an attempt to create space for Laine? Someone like Nyquist at 1 year, $5.5 million seems like a prime candidate. So yeah, that's one thing a lot of people aren't really talking about. The Columbus Blue Jackets, sure, they signed Johnny Gaudreau, but Patrick Laine is still a restricted restricted free agent, and last time I checked on Cap Friendly, I believe it said Columbus had like around 3.3 mil in cap space right now, which obviously is not enough to sign Laine, and I'd imagine they want this deal with Laine to be long-term, and at long-term, you're probably paying Laine north of $7.5 million. Now, the Blue Jackets also could explore the option of trading Patrik Laine himself, as opposed to trading someone else to free up cap space to re-sign Laine, but I feel like you hit the nail on the head. If they are going to unload some cap somewhere to re-sign Laine, Nyquist at 1 year left at 5.5 is definitely, I feel like, the prime candidate for that. Now, Nyquist has had a lot of injuries over the past couple of seasons. You'd probably have to attach a draft pick or something like that to unload that contract, but if that's something that Columbus is willing to do, then yeah, I definitely think Nyquist would be the one to go. So that is going to wrap up this episode of the Ask Me Anything series. Again, thank you so much to everyone for leaving questions on the post. There were so many good ones to pick from this week. If you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it a like. That is the best way to show your support. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content throughout the offseason just like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.